1 year later. It had been 5 days. 5 whole days. Big Macintosh stared at the sunset, a sinking feeling in his chest. She wouldn't be gone this long. Not Applejack. She cared too much about her family. Of course she was trying to save the world, which probably took longer than the normal friendship problem. She'd been gone long like this before, but somehow, this time felt different, and it scared Big Macintosh. He tried to keep up a brave face and reassure Apple Bloom that her big sister would return happy and healthy, that she would come trotting home, smile on her lips, and give them all a hug. He wanted that so badly it hurt. He missed her so much. A tear traced its way down his cheek and dripping off his chin. Please, Celestia, let her come home, he prayed, turning his face up to the heavens. Sighing, the stallion rose to his hooves and walked quietly back to the farmhouse. The 6 of them walked in a perfect row of silence. The path stretched out in front of them, long and uninviting. Applejack turned to her friends, trying to keep a smile on her lips.
Don't you worry, y'all. We've only got a few more miles till we reach the city.
Rainbow Dash sighed.
I could be there already.
Applejack gave her a dirty look and swung around to face the road once more, Pinkie Pie bouncing beside her.
Hey, AJ.
Yes, Pinkie?
I was wondering when we get back from the whole saving the world thing, we could make some of those cinnamon apple cupcakes. I found them for it.
Applejack grinned.
Sounds like a deal.
Pinkie squealed in her excited way and hopped forwards. Applejack chuckled and thought of her family back in Ponyville. How she missed them. She wondered what Big Mac was doing. Probably out apple bucking, she thought happily. Apple Bloom would be out with her friends, trying to figure out what their cutie marks would be, and Granny would be making some of her famous apple pie. Boy, Applejack missed those pies. What she would give to have one of those right now.
Ah!
Pinkie stumbled back, crashing into Rarity, who let out a startling yelp. Applejack was about to ask what was wrong when the problem presented itself. There, right in the path, stood a horde of things. The bodies were massive blobs of fat with webs of purple veins stretched out under gray, blubbery skin. 2 red eyes gleamed from the head, which was suspended on a spiny neck, and they had their long, rubbery arms out, claws extending from each crooked finger. Rows of searing teeth lined the gaping mouths, and their breath came in wheezing gasps. Applejack felt her limbs start to shake, and she forced them to be still. The other ponies were wide-eyed and trembling. Even Rainbow Dash was terrified. The monsters opened their mouths as one and roared. The sound was like 1,000 ghosts screaming eerie chills of shrieks. Applejack gulped and shifted her gaze to Twilight.
What the hell are those things?
She asked through gritted teeth. Twilight's lip quivered.
I don't know.
Her voice was barely a whisper. A thing wobbled towards them, its claws reaching for Applejack. Without thinking, the farm pony charged and swung around, her powerful back legs hitting the thing and sending it flying. The monster hit another monster's claws and exploded.
Yee-haw!
Applejack cried, her heart hammering in her chest. The monsters took one look at the remains of their friend and howled.
Come on, girls. We can get him.
Applejack yielded a new strength, filling her body. She had to protect her friends. Rainbow Dash landed beside her and bent down to the ground ready to charge. The other ponies steadied themselves, and the monsters started forwards.
Back! Back! They're back!
Apple Bloom shouted, her voice loud in his ear. Big Mac shot to his hooves, excitement pulsing through his veins. She was back, his sister. Together, he and Apple Bloom raced for the center of town, where Twilight and the rest of Applejack's friends were gathered. But there wasn't an orange pony in sight. There was no Applejack. Big Mac slowed down, studying the expressions on the ponies' faces. Each set of eyes were raw and red. Mouths tugged down in sad frowns. Tears still glistened on Fluttershy's fur as she hid her face behind her hair. Pinky's hair was straight, and her eyes had dark circles beneath them. Their bodies were marked with bruises and cuts. Rainbow Dash's wing was in a cast, and her lip was puffy. Not one of them seemed to have taken a bath recently, and dried blood caked their hooves. Even Rarity didn't seem to care about the mud coating her fur and the twigs sticking from her unkept purple mane. What had kept them from cleaning up? Big Macintosh and Apple Bloom cautiously walked up to the 5 ponies, hearts thundering in their chests. Where was Applejack? What had happened? Twilight caught sight of them first, and her face contorted into terrible grief.
Big Mac, Apple Bloom, I'm so sorry.
Her words hit Big Mac like a buck to the chest. He wanted to believe that this wasn't happening. Why else would she be sorry? Why else would his sister be gone? The other ponies stared at them with sadness and guilt. Apple Bloom tilted her head.
Where's my sister?
Fluttershy started sobbing, her chest heaving uncontrollably.
You better come to the castle.
Twilight said, her voice taut with emotion. Big Mac took a shuddering breath. This was his nightmare come true. Applejack kicked another monster, and it stumbled back. Licking her lips, the orange pony threw a punch with her hoof, catching the creature in the neck. She heard a crack, and the thing dropped to the ground, but not before its claws fell across Applejack's muzzle. She screamed, dropping to the ground, pain searing its way across her muzzle. A deep gash was now jaggedly cut across her nose. She lay on the ground, agony raking her entire body, warm blood washing over her face in nauseating waves. Gentle hooves lifted her up, and her ears perked hearing the ragged breathing of the yellow Pegasus.
Gosh, Applejack.
She squealed. The orange pony winced as the Pegasus pressed something to her wound.
What are you doing?
Fluttershy made a nervous sound.
I'm trying to stop all this bleeding.
She said. Applejack didn't care anyways. The pain controlled her. Then Twilight came swooping down out of nowhere. Her horn glowed with magical energy and shot down on Applejack's muzzle. The injury stopped bleeding, but it wasn't healing. Before Twilight could issue a healing spell, a monster rose behind her. Groaning, Applejack got to her hooves and knocked Twilight out of the way. Then she kicked the monster, sending it right into Rainbow Dash's waiting hooves. Applejack staggered backwards and took a deep breath.
Gotta survive. Gotta go home safe. I promised.
We were fighting off these terrible monsters. Demons, really.
Twilight started, her eyes fixed on the table in front of her.
They were so strong. We were having trouble keeping them away from the cities.
Rainbow Dash continued, her voice raspier than Big Mac remembered.
Applejack, she was the strongest of us all. They hit her and beat her, and yet she took so many out.
Twilight said, tears pooling in her purple eyes. Big Macintosh swallowed the lump in his throat. Maybe his sister wasn't dead. Maybe she was just hurt really bad and in a hospital somewhere. He wanted to hope that she would be all right.
She saved us.
Pinkie Pie muttered.
She saved us all.
Quick, duck!
Applejack screamed at Pinkie, who dropped to the ground just as the claws swung over her head. The pink pony rolled to the side before popping up, watching as the farm pony leapt in front of her and delivered a hard kick to the monster's chest. A sickening crack was heard as the monster's bones shattered. Pinkie Pie blew out a breath and examined her friend closely. Blood dripped from several cuts. Bruises covered the farm pony's entire body, and worst of all, her face was slashed with a terrible, deep wound. Applejack was breathing hard, blood spilling over her lips.
You get the others to safety. I'll get the last two.
Her voice wobbled, as did her legs.
No, you can't!
Pinky shouted, tears falling from her bright blue eyes.
I'm the only one who can stop him.
Applejack countered, stumbling to the side. Pinky gently held her.
No, you have to get away from them. You're hurt really bad.
She cried, tears stinging in her eyes.
I gotta.
Applejack said grimly.
You'll die!
Pinky screamed, panic racing in her chest.
Then tell my family I love him. And I love y'all too.
She waved her hoof at the rest of her friends who were trying so hard to stop a monster.
But I won't die. I love this world too much.
Applejack said, pushing Pinky away and charging into battle. Applebloom sniffed, finally starting to realize what must have happened.
Applejack had killed the last of them, but she was so hurt. There was so much blood.
Rarity said, her eyes widening as she remembered.
There was no way she could get back to its city. She begged us to go on. There were more monsters coming, but we wouldn't leave her.
Twilight said, tears now sliding down her face. The ground was littered with the bodies of monsters and one orange pony. Her eyes stared skyward, and blood dripping onto the dirt. Her hat lay forgotten, just a few feet away from where she lay. Applejack's chest heaved with rattling breaths, and her teeth were bare in unbearable pain. Rainbow Dash raced over, first to notice her among the monsters. Her wing was bent in an unnatural angle, but she didn't care. Not right now. The others soon crawled to their injured friend.
Quick, we have to get her to a hospital!
Rainbow Dash cried.
No, it's time.
Applejack whispered.
No! We're not letting you just die!
Rainbow Dash shouted. Applejack somehow managed a weak smile.
Knew you were gonna be like that.
She chuckled. This made Rainbow even angrier.
How in the hay can you be laughing? You're dying!
Applejack sighed.
I don't know. I feel weightless. Like I could fly up there with you.
No!
Twilight muttered, panic seeping into her voice. She tried every healing spell she had, but none worked. They only faded the bruises and half-healed cuts. Applejack sucked in more air, knowing that she wouldn't be on the earth much longer. This realization brought sadness and anger, but also peace. No more worries, no more pain, no more anything. But she would lose her life, her friends, her family. Tears mixed with the sweat and blood as she stared up at her friends.
It's all right. Let me go.
She said, fog creeping into her mind.
Applejack, darling!
Rarity said for once at a loss of words. The farm pony struggled to keep awake, to keep death from taking her. You're not taking me before I tell them how much I love them, she thought stubbornly.
I love y'all. And I always will.
She sputtered a cough, blood specks spraying outwards.
Tell my family I love them. Tell Mike. Tell Mike. It's not his fault.
Her eyes shut, and she felt her body relax.
I love you too, AJ.
Rainbow Dash whispered, watery tears dripping from her rose eyes.
I love you so much! I love you so much!
much.
Pinky sniffed, seeing there was nothing more that could be done to help her friend.
Me too.
Fluttershy managed to say through her sobs.
Please don't leave. I need you.
Twilight said. Applejack peered open her eyes once more, wondering why she wasn't dead yet. The pain was dulling to a fading pulse now, and the fog was thicker.
Twilight, you're a great pony, and you'll do fine without me. Now just let me go in peace, will ya?
A hint of a smile raised on Applejack's lips as her breath became slower and slower.
I love you.
Twilight said, her body shaking. The friends reached in and gave her one last hug before the howls of the monsters forced them to run.
We didn't want to leave the body there, but if we didn't, we'd be dead as well.
Rarity finished the alicorn sentence. Applebloom cried out, burying her head into her brother's side. Pinky got down from her throne and reached behind her, pulling out a worn, brown Stenson and placing it at Big Mac's frozen hooves. The stallion stared at it, emotions tumbling inside him. His little sister clung to him like a life raft, and the images of his dead parents filled his mind. Blood everywhere, tooth marks and scratches. She died like them. He told her she wouldn't. He had lied to her. Applebloom saw the hat and cried harder, tugging it closer to her and hugging it. It still smelled like her, apples and sweat, but there was no mistaking the ugly dried blood specks decorating it. Applebloom's eyes were pools of liquid, and her nose a river of mucus. Big Mac hadn't cried in years, not since his parents died, but now the tears came like a flood. The other ponies came together and surrounded the two apples, wrapping them in a hug, every one of them bawling. The hat dropped to the table where it sat, a reminder of a friend lost forever. Weeks later, the funeral had been a simple, tearful affair. All of Ponyville showed up, as well as the whole Apple family, the princesses, a few assorted ponies. Even Discord came, dressed in somber black. Applejack was laid to rest next to her parents up at the tallest hill of the orchard, under the first apple tree planted. Big Mac hadn't wanted to see her body, but he knew he should say goodbye. When he saw what was left of her, he almost threw up. Her lower stomach was ripped open and had been picked apart by those things. Her eyes were glassy and staring up at him with a sad but peaceful look. Her orange fur was more red than orange, and her hooves bent at a weird angle. Applebloom had taken one look before running straight outside and puking all over the grass. Her hat now rested on a shelf above the kitchen doorway. Its faded surface had been cleaned of the blood. Now, Big Mac sat on the porch, staring at the sunset, much like a day so long ago. He felt hollow and lifeless. How much heartache would he have to endure before the world decided that he was broken enough? Tears dripped down from his green eyes, and he wiped them away. He needed to be strong. Without Applejack, he was almost everything on the farm. He needed that strength to carry on. He needed her. The swell of anger took hold of him. He had promised her. He should have been there. She should be alive.
You know, with all that moping about me, I thought you'd notice me sooner.
A voice chuckled in his ear. He sat up straighter, turning around so quickly he almost ran into the farmhouse. There she stood in a shimmer of golden sunlight, his sister Applejack. He reached out to touch her, but she backed away, a playful smile on her face.
No, Mackie, I have to tell you something.
Her expression turned serious. Big Mac just stared. His dead sister was standing before him, as a ghost. How? He mused.
No time.
Applejack insisted.
I have to tell you this.
Go ahead.
You can't blame yourself for my death. You gotta move on.
But...
I know how hard it is, Mac. But the farm ain't worth losing over my dead body. Hire some pony to help. Y'all need it. Please don't lose sight of the living, Mac. Apple Bloom and Granny Smith still need you.
She said, tears rushing to her eyes. I will. Big Mac said, stumbling over the words.
Good.
Applejack said, looking relieved. Then she strode forwards, giving her brother a hug. Big Mac squeezed back. She felt so real. Her body was warm, and he could feel her coarse fur and smell the apple scent tangled in her mane. I miss you so much, Big Mac whispered in her ear, and she nodded.
Me too.
She stepped back, her form glowing.
I'm only allowed one visit each. Don't worry. I'll see Granny and Apple Bloom too, just like you. Don't say nothing. It's gotta be in intervals.
Her face scrunched up.
So many doggone rules.
She sighed.
Ma and Pa miss y'all too. They've always wanted to come and say something, but I reckon that would have made everything worse. I felt like you needed a little reminder, so I came down to talk to you.
Big Mac gulped. And you're with them? Ma and Pa?
Yep.
Tell them I love them and I'll miss them, Big Mac said, wiping another tear from his face.
I will, Mackie.
Applejack whispered. Will I see you again?
Not while you're still alive. I'm sorry.
Her brow frowned.
Just don't go and die just to see me.
I can't. The family needs me, Big Macintosh replied. Applejack nodded.
Goodbye, big brother.
Bye, sis. I love you. She gave him one last smile.
Don't forget, I'll always love you, and I'll always be here.
Big Mac wrapped her in another hug, and she laughed before disappearing in a shimmer of golden light.